Ransomware attacks are just becoming more and more frequent, and people are becoming more and more worried about this. There's been a definite shift in the marketing and also in the product design, where security has now become almost the forefront. Yes, it's data protection, but it's about data protection in a much, much wider way.
That's kind of why I also think that this backup thing has gotten more attention now than before. It is, in fact, our last line of defense, right? It's the absolute last thing you want to do is restore from a backup.
If your environment gets compromised, what happens is when someone gets hold of your backup solution's administrative passwords, they gain access to absolutely everything.
If you get people to think about that before the incident and they can test it, they're in so much better place if the real thing ever happens.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. From 2025 NetApp EMEA LATAM Enterprise Partner of the Year, Proact. Let's talk data.
That's a mouthful.
I know. It's difficult. It doesn't exactly skip off the tongue.
No.
But yeah, should we try it again? Okay, ready? 2025 NetApp EMEA LATAM Enterprise Partner of the Year, Proact. I think, we should. Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to thank my family and my gods and various other things. Okay, this week we are very lucky to be joined by Lara Matthews from the UK for joining us. I say the UK, I should say Scotland.
Well, we're part of the United Kingdom still.
You are part of the, but even so, it should be Scotland, shouldn't it? Let's be honest. Lara was with us last week as well, but essentially, Lara, if you can give everybody a bit quick intro as to what you do for Proact.
Sure, I'm one of the solution architects within the UK. I specialise in data protection, and I just work across all of our solutions and our managed services as well, though. So I'm a general SA.
Yeah, no, you're a backup specialist, General SA. Yes. And you probably do just about everything else as well, in my experience.
So a general specialist.
A general specialist.
Yes, general specialist.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Yeah, does that work? Let's go with it.
Yeah.
I'm a general dog's body. Is that the same?
I'm just generally annoying.
Yeah, okay,
so,
good.
Yeah.
That's both of us.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So really what we thought we'd talk about today, and this is a subject that Lara and I both spend a bit of time thinking about, I suppose, is the way that the marketing messaging has changed with regard to backup solutions. And there's been a lot of focus these days on cyber protection and on data resilience and cyber resilience and operational resilience and anything with resilience in the name. Choose your, the stick resilience at the end of it. And I suppose from our perspective, it's been quite challenging for the customer to be able to deal with that, or to be able to understand exactly where your backup solution ends and your resilience for your environment begins. What are your thoughts, Lara?
Yes, it's been a very interesting shift in the last year, I guess. Probably where we're seeing an awful lot of focus on security. Now, that's understandable because ransomware attacks are just becoming more and more frequent, and people are becoming more and more worried about this. But it's interesting that there's been a definite shift in the marketing and also in the product design, an awful lot of backup systems recently, where security has now become almost the forefront. So yes, it's data protection, but it's about data protection in a much, much wider way, and talking around about how you would test your backups, how you would know that they are good, and these types of things, which is very unusual. And it's certainly, if you think about backup a few years ago, for one, most people weren't that interested in it. They were very much set it, forget it, and hope that it works. Most people didn't test their backups, and they didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. And now people are understanding that data protection is more important, but this focus is quite strange, and it's challenging to know where this should end. Really, should the backup software be doing this? And is this just a marketing hype by a particular vendor that could do that better? Or is this something that really will help the customers? And I'm still struggling with that as well.
I think we've looked at it, and it's not just. I did a bit of digging on this before we did the recording, but it's not just one vendor either. All of the vendors, all of the big vendors, let's say,
yes,
are really focusing on the more resilience-based messaging. So here's. I'm not mentioning the vendor because it's just unfair, but they all essentially do the same thing. But the vendor I was looking at was more or less saying that their backup solution does recovery and fault tolerance, system redundancy, disaster recovery, cybersecurity, and testing and maintenance.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I just think that's
how many eggs and how many baskets do you want?
Well, exactly. It's a backup solution, for Pete's sake. And while I understand that to a certain extent, some of those elements could, in theory, be done by your backup solution, I don't think that you would put your your business's fault tolerance into your backup environment. I think you build that into the infrastructure that you're running within your business, surely.
Yes. I can see that definitely. I mean, we all know that there are various backup products that have for years also been able to do replication and failover and those types of things. So that, but they have always, though they've been bundled as one product, they actually are almost separate products and work separated from each other. So you still need to think about that. You can't just say, I've got a backup and therefore I have a disaster recovery solution. So yeah, and it's interesting that they are pushing more for this. But I think everybody is trying to hit these 5 kind of NIST areas and be able to say, we can do something in that area. We've got a product in that area. Don't you worry. So rather than 2 years ago, we would be saying security is a layered approach. You want to have these outer perimeters, inner perimeters and such like, and then your backup sits in the middle of it. They're now almost trying to push that out a little, I feel, so that there's more security for features within the backup itself.
Which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, right? But I think the idea of relying on just one vendor or one thing for doing everything is a scary thought, really, because one kind of issue with it might compromise the entire thing. Even though they're separate products, that might have or act as separate products, it might have a common management plane or something like that. And if that's compromised, well, then all bets are off, right? So, and that's kind of why I also think that this backup thing has gotten more attention now than before as well, is that it is, in fact, our last line of defense, right? It's the absolute last thing you want to do is restore from a backup. If something has gone so wrong that you have to restore it from a backup because you've been compromised somehow, that is actually your last thing to do. It's the last thing you want to do, and it's the last thing you can do. So if it's gotten that far, and it doesn't work, well,
yes,
something's hit the creek, right? So it's But I'm also wondering that perhaps this kind of shift in marketing and how the approach to market with these things are also perhaps even influenced by things like DORA and things like NIST 2, as you mentioned, right? Because DORA is basically the Digital Operations Resiliency Act. So once and every C-level people, everyone on the C-level suite reads that, they need to have a checklist, right? Do we have digital operation resiliency or not? And once the vendors actually can tick that box, well,
I do hope it's not one box on that basis.
No, it isn't. But you get my simplification here, right?
Be good though if there's one box for that. No, but I think this is it. And I think businesses, it's a bit bizarre. Most of the marketing that backup solutions tend to provide is related to big enterprise. That's normally the way that it works. So lots of the stuff that we see coming through some of the big backup vendors are related to massive cloud environments or huge cybersecurity staffing that they provide on the basis of their very high end products. But I think this sort of view of one product does it all is aimed very much at the small to medium enterprise customers. So if you were an SME and you didn't have much money to spend, you're not going out and buying yourselves a SIEM environment, a UABO environment, managed data response, a clean room. You haven't got the money to do that. And in that environment, maybe you want somebody who's going to say, oh yeah, we kind of do it all in one box. And that would be useful.
It certainly allows you to tick a lot of boxes.
Else,
Yeah, I think that is part of it, isn't it? It's able to say there's we have a backup and we have a plan, and we can use this product to do those things. So there's definitely value in it for our customers, for sure. So
yeah. But I think maybe the smaller ones, whereby the budget is a big constraining factors. Because I agree with you in the fact that we really should. We've talked about it in the past, maybe, and this is probably an area for Christian Lara more than anything else. The layered approach is the best approach. You should have SIEM running in your environment, for example. But the key element about using backup as a way of protecting your data is you only use it once a day. It's not protecting your data all the time. Christian?
Yeah. I think first of all, before we go into that, I think speaking of the smaller businesses, they oftentimes have nothing or a really, really old backup solution. And I'm more than happy if they get any better with such bundled products, if it makes their life easier, because in the end, they all have to do something about it. So better take this one than scatter it out and do nothing in the end. From the question regarding the layered approach and active and passive, I think that is where it's getting really important. From my view, backup often is, as we said before, like the last resort. If we can bring it a little bit closer to not being the last resort, but being helpful in general incident recovery in a smaller way, I think that's also very positive. But as you said, it's normally not an active solution for everything. We have storage vendors there doing that stuff in regards of ransomware protection. We have EDR solutions. We have the operating systems themselves getting better and better there. So the question really is, what do you protect with that solution? Where does it fit in, and what is it relevant for? Is it helping restoring Active Directory very fast? That would be awesome, because that's really a challenge. But the question is really, do they do that, or are they really fast in just providing the data back and maybe having that in a great checklist to check some boxes? But yeah, what's really in it, I think, is important.
That's a really interesting point, because the last couple of iterations of two of the main backup softwares that I work with have really focused on Active Directory and Entra ID backup. They've both brought this out. Now, one of them has had a basic version of this for years, but that's been a massive focus. And I think there's some stats out there that say something like 95% of ransomware attacks do attack the Active Directory as one of the first points of call. So you can see why the backup vendors are saying, right, this is going to be something that we can leverage, and we can, add additional products and help customers with this, but also make more sales as well, because it's usually a separate product or a separate SKU to be able to back that up. But yes, that is vitally important, and being able to extend the scope of what we're protecting, and that they're focusing on that, is always a good thing, for sure.
Yeah, because it's we didn't used to do that sort of thing, did we? I mean, backups for Active Directory used to be, you take the system state of the machine, therefore you get Active Directory. Great. And if you wanted a more granular control, maybe you can install an agent that will protect Active Directory, but it would be quite a simple product. You buy it, you install it on one AD server, and job done. Entra ID is a completely different animal, and we use that for Office 365. We use it for our cloud-based security. We use it for our on-site security. So everything is kind of linked to Entra ID. So backup solutions now for Entra ID are charged per user. So that's gone up a lot because we used to just buy one agent that did the job. So is that really that important that actually the price is going to go up to now do it as if you were backing up Office 365? It's possible it's slightly more expensive to back it up than it is to back up 365. That seems a bit nuts.
I guess it depends how important we think it is. I mean, if nothing else works in your environment, if your Active Directory has been compromised and you can't recover it, you can't even start to do the rest of the recovery. So it's almost fundamental for everything now. And I think one of the focuses that a lot of the vendors are putting on it is we're not just backing up Entra ID, we're trying to back up the ecosystem around that, because as with a lot of Microsoft products, it's not really one product. It kind of extends out. There's group policies and such like which aren't really held within Entra ID. There's also Intune type things. How do customers protect that? So there's all of these things they're trying to wrap up into that and give that level of protection. But it's always going to come at a cost. So again, that's, cost benefit analysis needs to be done.
I wonder how many people out there are doing it. I wonder how many people out there are actually backing up their Entra ID, because this is a relatively new thing. So, Christian, your thoughts?
Yeah, the funny thing I think is backing up something like Intune is pretty simple, to be honest. It's there's an API for it. You can script everything if you want to do it. So it's also, I think, pretty easy to jump into that market to say, hey, now we're protecting that also, because there are even community projects doing stuff like that. So maybe that is also one reason why they are all expanding, or many of them are expanding their services, because it's not that hard. You don't have to develop any agents, have like all the permission stuff. That's all sorted out basically. So maybe that's part of it.
That's a good thing though, right? So Microsoft is actually providing the APIs that you need to actually be able to protect it, which is good. And then we end up with doing things like we were talking about. You don't necessarily want one product that does everything. You also do not want to have, for instance, Microsoft being the ones responsible for your backups of their service in their service, right? You do want to kind of separate the things so you don't have a common way of attacking that, and being able to delete all your backups at the same time as you delete your Entra ID is a bad idea, right? So
it's a good point, and let's skip away from SaaS a little bit because we're going on to that later on. But the key thing here as well, though, is, and Christian Mohn's point, is the fact that if you buy a backup solution and you have that backup solution inside your environment, and that backup solution is doing everything for you, if your environment gets compromised, obviously we all hope that doesn't happen, but these days you have to expect the fact that it's likely to. What happens is when someone gets hold of your backup solution's administrative passwords, they gain access to absolutely everything. So in this situation, are we saying that actually being in control of your backup solution is a bad thing, or at least leaves your environment completely open to abuse by somebody who's attacked your environment?
I think if you attach your backup into Active Directory and don't keep it separated out, then you are opening yourself up. And that's definitely something that most of the backup vendors are really pushing now, is this should be separated. We shouldn't have it on the domain. That might make it a little more difficult to do the backups, but it does add that extra layer of protection. But also nearly every backups vendor now is offering immutability. So even if somebody gets onto the backup, they can't, even with the software, they can't delete it. So they get onto the backup, they become the administrator, they tell it to delete the last week's backups, and the software says, no, I can't do that. And at that point, it's, they're then down to, can they get underneath that? Can they get into the operating system that's underneath that? And quite a lot of the time that is really heavily locked down as well. So these security layers are being added in to try and protect that final vestige of data, for sure.
Yeah, so maybe like two-factor authentication and things like that nature, whereby they can limit the individual users, maybe with apps on their phones or what have you, to be able to gain access.
Absolutely, yeah. So adding in YubiKey authentication, adding in a Google Authenticator or something, so that you're adding in that extra layer of passwording as well. So that definitely adds some more security. I've also seen recently with some of the SaaS backup products, not backing up of SaaS, but actually the backup that runs as a SaaS service, that you can create single sign-on for most users, but you can still have a kind of break glass local user, and that you can then add two-factor authentication or web authentication onto. So if your Active Directory gets compromised, you still can get onto the system, which is another thing to think about. So many different areas you need to worry about in the event of a ransomware attack, for sure.
Yeah, because that's the thing is right as well, right? So if someone breaches your environment and disables your accounts, you won't. If you have those integrated, you won't be able to restore because you don't have access to your backups. So they might not have been able to delete them, but I've locked you as an administrator out of actually using them, which is equally as bad, right? So I've also seen some vendors do things with what I guess they call 4 eyes kind of changes, where if you do a change, someone else has to look at it and also approve it, and both of them have to approve it basically at the same time to be able to have that configuration change stick, which also adds an extra layer of you don't have one admin that can do everything. It needs to be verified some way. So trust but verify in that sense also makes a good point.
We've had a thing in the past whereby we're taught to understand that attacks don't happen quickly sometimes. So the attacker may well be on your network for a long period of time. So I mean, a patient attacker can quite literally just go into your environment, having gained access to your backup solution, and go, well, okay, well, I back up all of these VMs on a daily basis within this backup solution, so I'm going to miss that one out now. I'm going to miss that, and then a week later, I'm going to miss that one out, and a week later, I'm going to miss that one out. Which means that if they're the key VMs for your environment, you might not notice they're no longer being backed up because they were in the VM list. And you may not notice, therefore, that they're now aging out of your immutable storage. So you know, if they can remove your finance server and database from the backup and say, okay, right, now that's a guaranteed ransomware return because you're going to have that server back. So even with immutable storage, if they've got access to the environment, they can still do nasty things.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely where the multi-authorization comes in, and that highlighting of anything destructive, if any client is removed, if any backup is attempted to be deleted, highlighting that as soon as possible, for sure.
Connecting that back to a SIEM then can really help you get that info faster to the relevant person, because when every system only is showing its own alarms in the web GUI or whatever, and you only log in there once every 4 weeks, then it might actually be too late already to see those. So again, get the whole holistic view, how you want to say it, and connect also your backup system, at least for the alerts, to your SIEM solution.
Yeah. And I think, again, we're assuming that everyone knows what SIEM is. I suppose SIEM essentially stands for Security, Information and Event Management. But essentially it means that you can you monitor the log traffic on your network. So you can put SIEM on your switches, on your servers, on your storage, on your backup solution, on anything that provides log data. And then it just monitors that and looks for changes that it considers anomalous. So if somebody is attempting to keep logging into a server every night at 3 o'clock in the morning and maybe failing, but you won't normally see that. But with a SIEM environment, the SIEM will go, hold on a minute, that looks wrong. But that guy shouldn't be doing that. That account hasn't been used for years. It's making those connections for you. So it's probably, from the point of view of someone else being on your network, the most effective method of defending against that. It won't stop them accessing it, but it will at least let you know that it's there. Yeah, Christian?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, and this is why, and it's real time, obviously, as well. So the point with the backup side of things is the fact that the backup solution will not do any of that in real time. It might, and even I'm skeptical about this sort of stuff. And Lara, you can talk me around, but I'm skeptical about the whole sort of, oh yeah, we scan your backups for anomalous stuff. And okay, I understand if they're scanning for encryption, that's obvious because everything that's encrypted doesn't dedupe and is suddenly a lot bigger. So the backup goes from being relatively small to being really quite large in a short space of time. But scanning for malware and scanning for things of that nature, I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is your antivirus software doing? That's what that's supposed to do. What is your backup involved in this process?
Yeah, there are a lot of softwares now that will alert to really basic things. I say basic, that's probably very unfair, but changes in the backup size, changes in a file type. So if a file, they backed it up as a doc yesterday and it came through as something else today, there's an alert there. As you say, that kind of change in entropy as well. There's a lot more files to back up. It'll alert that as part of the base ingest. So at the end of the backup or during the backup, it'll say, hold on, this client isn't right. Something's changed. All the others are very much post-process. You're not going to get those unless you go looking for them for the most part. You can go across the vendors and their scanning of threats is very much either go and look for something very specific using Lara scripts or scan all of this and tell me what you can see using an antivirus. But it all has to be done once the backup is run and they can essentially kind of run up those virtual machines in the background or scan the files. Scanning files is I guess a simpler process. Scanning at the virtual machine level certainly is a lot more complex.
Yeah,
and the more metadata.
So you've got to take your backup and rehydrate it into another virtual environment to be able to scan it. Is that what we're suggesting?
Yes, to a certain extent. Some of them claim to be able to do that within their own environment. They mount the backup somehow and then scan it. So, but it is definitely more of a process. It's not going to alert you as the backup's happening. So this is going to be 24 hours or more down the line.
Yeah, it's a post-process kind of evaluation of the backup data, right? So be it a VMware virtualized machine, you know the file format, you know the VMDK structure, you can mount that in a software and then scan the files inside of it. But to be able to actually see what's running in it executably, if you can execute something, you actually have to power on that VM somehow on some hardware, right? And power it up, then do an air-gapped kind of isolated, non-networked version of that VM, and then scan it as a process while the VM is running. And that's completely different than scanning through a bunch of files in a VMDK file, which is the basis of the disk file in a VMware virtual machine.
Yeah, and so there's the facility to do it, but obviously the key element there is that there's no point in doing it at the point that you take the backup, because surely your antivirus software is taking care of that, your anti-malware software. One assumes you have that on your network. You should not be replacing your backup solution. You should not be removing your antivirus protection and thinking your backup's going to do it. That's my point.
No, yeah, definitely
that would be bad.
No, yes. Do not do that.
But it does provide you with the facility to do it post.
Go on.
I think most of the time where backup vendors are suggesting that you do this is if you know you've been attacked, you want to know you've got a clean recovery. So you scan your backups before you recover them so that you can then know that you've got good data to recover to. But I'm not aware of many backup vendors that say you should be doing this kind of scanning or even capable of doing the scanning at the end of every single backup, because the processing power to do all of that is going to be quite onerous.
Yeah. So what a bunch of them do, though, is enable you to look for PII data or things like that inside of your backups, right? So you can get alerts that, okay, these backups contain data that might be GDPR compliant or not. You might have credit card numbers in that backup and stuff like that. But again, that's scanning for patterns inside of files inside of the backup. It's not validating that you're ransomware free, because
I agree.
on an executable level, you don't know that on a file basis, right? So,
but Lara, do you know, can you, in such cases where you have been attacked and you know that you have a problem, use your own indicators of compromise to search you through the backups? Do you know that?
So there are certain backup softwares that will use Yara scripts to be able to search for very specific known virus. So if you're looking for a particular indicator of compromise, you can do that search through them with the scripting.
So that's very helpful in such a case. Yeah, to be really fast to decide since when you have the problem and which backup is the one you should reinstall or bring that back up to life. Yeah,
perhaps slightly ignorant of me, but isn't that one assumes you've been attacked? If you've been attacked, the first thing you do is you shut everything down.
Nah,
no.
Depends.
That's what I'm assuming, because I'm assuming you disconnect everything of the network because you don't want the attack to spread.
It really depends on how you're basically earning your money. We had cases where that happened and then the company went bankrupt because they weren't able to get it back on. And afterwards, the decision, was kind of maybe not the best, because getting production or keeping production open might have been the better solution to keep the money flowing in. I don't say that is then a very healthy company if they don't survive for 2 or 3 days being completely offline, but still it might be a factor. And that is why it's so important to understand where your crown jewels are. And that basically then gives also the decision what you can turn off easily and what might be a severe problem if you turn it off directly.
But either way, you probably need, this is a situation whereby you need help. At the end of the day, you should be calling in an incident response team or something else on those lines to be able to then make those decisions for you. I don't know. That's a really good point, because certainly my understanding is the fact that you turn everything off, then you call your incident response team. But it seems the other way around. It seems call your incident response team and find out if they want you to turn everything off. Is that fair?
In an ideal world, you have made that thoughts before the incident happens, so you know if you what is your first step.
You speak to your incident response team now. Get them on board.
Yeah, but then even the incident response team should already have the plan for your environment ready, because you talked about it before, you created an IR plan before, and not do it on the fly, because that is not really a good idea.
That's a really interesting point then. How many people do you think have that?
But I'm seeing more customers asking for tabletop exercises, which I think is a really good start in terms of how do you, this is it. The whole place has melted down. Now what do we do? If you get people to think about that before the incident and they can test it, they're in so much better place if the real thing ever happens, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's also required for more and more customers and companies due to NIS2 and stuff like that. So there is the need to create an IR plan, incident response, that is, for everybody who doesn't know.
Yeah, and keep a physical printout of it somewhere.
Absolutely, yes.
You might be locked out from actually accessing it if things go really bad, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but again, going back a few years, the IR plan or whatever it was, restore from backup, and that was one point, right? Now that you might be in a case where you might not even trust your hardware anymore, right? Something might have actually happened to the physical hardware. So how do you restore if you don't have any hardware? How do you handle that, right? So there's a bunch of things that might happen. That's the same thing as a fire, basically, right? You have to just, remove everything, start from fresh. But how do you do that? So, having a backup of your data is fine, good, great. You need that. But if you can't restore it anywhere, it has no use, right? So that's why I always keep saying that backup is really boring. No, but the thing is, restores are not.
Restores are cool, but backups are boring. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, backups are boring. They should be boring. By definition, they should be boring. They should just work. you shouldn't have any surprises when it comes to backup, right? So by definition, it should be boring.
I'm going to say you shouldn't have any surprises when it comes to restores either.
No, but the thing is, that's where the most of the surprises actually arise, because people haven't tested their backups, haven't tested their restores, and haven't really thought through how they're going to do that if they actually have to restore everything. And that includes, in which order do you restore what? What is dependent on what? What do you need first to be able to have the secondary system work? I mean, if you don't have your Active Directory and everything's integrated with that with regards to logons, having the business CRM system up and running doesn't help, because no one can log into it.
Yeah, exactly. And all your Office 365 stuff and everything else on those lines. Access to all your files, access to all your emails.
That's where it comes in, that restores are more exciting than backups.
And that's,
mostly
I guess,
because people don't test them.
I guess that's where a backup software that can do cross-hypervisor recovery also really helps you. If you've got something that can take your on-premise VMware environment and recover it into an Azure virtual machine native, then you've got somewhere to go, I guess. If you've lost everything.
with AWS, other cloud providers also exist. That sort of stuff. Yeah,
GCP, AWS. Yeah.
I've heard other hypervisors exist as well, but I don't know. So.
Right. Okay. I think probably we best call it there. I'm going to say, I suppose. So let's just finish off. So from the point of view of moving things forward, from the thoughts about how backup solutions protect. What are your thoughts? What would be your final advice to customers looking at a backup solution, Lara?
I think it's very difficult to make a decision between the different vendors. Obviously, it maybe shouldn't all be based on security, but whatever backup vendor you choose, test your recoveries.
Good advice. Christian, Lara?
Yeah, I would basically say the same, +1 there. And if there are some extra things that might really speed up the recovery of your crown jewels, aka AD, Entra ID, whatever, then take a look at that, and also test that in some kind of form, because that can really save days and weeks. That works out well.
Good moan.
Keep everything administrative, IT technical separate from everything else.
Good.
Do not use the same Active Directory for managing access to your hypervisors, storage, networking interfaces, SIEM solution, or whatever, as you keep your end users in. Keep those things separate. Keep them airlocked, gapped from each other. One compromise into one of them shouldn't be able to go the other way around. So, and we all know that the most the most successful way of attacking someone is through phishing emails and stuff like that. So even as an admin, have separate accounts. One that's your user account and one that's your locked down administrative IT admin account, and don't use your email on both and things like that. Keep that separated, and it'll be a much easier way back if something happens.
Agreed. And I suppose I would say that, Entra ID is probably a bigger thing than we think, if we're used to maybe what Active Directory used to be. And because everything kind of single signs on to that these days, keep a track of what single signs on, and maybe pay a little bit more attention to your Entra ID backup if you're using that sort of technology, because that appears to be an area where maybe even the backup vendors have been a little bit late getting there, but it will have a big impact in the event that anything goes awry.
Yeah, and one last single thing there.
Yeah, go.
Get your logs into one solution and monitor them. Your logs contain everything you need to know. Yeah. But if they're disaggregated, spread all around, no one's watching them, they're of no use to you. Aggregate them into a solution and keep an eye on them, because that's where you might get an inkling that something's going on that you wouldn't know without it. So
yeah, I think that's a fair point, isn't it? If you want to know that something's happening before it happens, you should be looking at SIEM, UABA, MDA, things of that nature. Because we love an acronym in IT. It's just I think we should just randomly throw letters from time to time. See if we do a podcast where we randomly throw letters, see if anyone notices.
Pick the odd one out. Well, not one of us though, because that.
We're all odd.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lara, for joining us. Very much appreciated. It's been good fun, and hopefully we'll see you for another one shortly.